Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another awesome income tax video. This video is specifically on childcare expenses, which is one of the other deductions that we're allowed to deduct against net income for tax purposes. Here we go. Childcare expenses that we're going to be looking at here are amounts that a taxpayer is going to pay somebody else to look after their children so that they can do other things. The other things that they're doing generally are earning income from employment, earning income for business, or possibly going back to school. So these are expenses incurred while the parent is doing any of these things and has to pay somebody else to look after their kids. Now, some of the potential expenses here, specific expenses incur lodging at a boarding school, so any expenses incurred for that, any overnight sports camp where there's some kind of lodging involved, any day camps or day sports schools where child care, actually caring for the child, is a key component of the services offered, and nursery schools or babysitting or daycare. Can just any child care expense be deducted by either one of the parents? Well, in families that have two parents, which is, a large component of families, although not all of them for sure, the qualifying child care expenses have to be deducted by the spouse that's earning the lowest income in the year. Now, there are some expenses that would potentially be considered ineligible for deduction, and these are any payments made to relatives under the age of 18. So you can't pay your older kids to look after your younger kids and then deduct those expenses. Childcare provided by the actual father or mother. Sorry, but any payments that you make to your spouse to look after your own kids aren't deductible from your income. Any fees for activities where the childcare itself is not a key component of the activity, like swimming lessons or girl guides, for example, or karate. I mean, you're sending your kids off to learn specific skills or to engage in specific types of, whatever it is, sell cookies, whatever you're doing with the girl guides. But childcare isn't a key component of that. So any expenses related to that can't be deductible from income and wouldn't be eligible. Any medical costs incurred and any transportation costs, driving or sending your kid on the bus or getting a taxi for your kid to the eligible expense locations, such as a day camp or a week-long overnight camp or something like that. None of those expenses would be eligible. The actual deduction itself is subject to a limitation clause. Again, it's only permitted for costs incurred related to children who are under 17 years old. That's key. And they're limited to the lesser of three amounts. So the deduction will be limited to the lesser of any actual costs that are incurred in the year, whatever those happen to be. $5,000 per child who's aged 7 to 16, and $8,000 for any child that's under age 7. An additional $11,000 per child would be deductible for any child with a mental or physical disability. The final lesser of three things is 2/3 of the taxpayer's quote-unquote earned income for the year. Now, we haven't spoken about earned income before, and it's defined differently throughout the Tax Act, but for the purposes of child care expense deduction, earned income includes employment income, business income, and any research grants received in order to go to school. This subject isn't super complicated, but let's run through a quick example. Here we have an example where James and Vesper are married and they incur $22,000 worth of daycare expenses during the current tax year for their three children. Their ages are 4, 7, and 11. James and Vesper's earned income for the year is $82,000 for James and $95,000 for Vesper. So what do we have to do here? Calculate the maximum child care expense deduction for the current tax year, and we have to indicate which one of the two spouses is going to make that deduction. No problem, we'll do that in the next slide. First off, let's figure out who is going to be able to make the deduction in the year, and because he is the lower income earner, it's going to be James. So James's maximum deduction for the year is going to equal the lesser of, and it's going to be three things. The first thing is the actual costs. So the actual costs incurred in the year for childcare was 22 grand worth of daycare. So we're going to write out 22,000 bucks. The second is these maximums per child. So we have one kid who is less than 7 years old, and that's going to be $8,000 for that one kid. And then we're going to have 2 kids that are between 7 and 16. So all of this is going to be equal to, I believe, $18,000. Okay. Remember, we're looking for the lesser of here. Then we're going to have a look over at our third possible criteria, which is 2/3 of James's earned income. So 2/3 of $82,000 is something weird like 54, 667. So in this case, we're going to have to choose the maximum deduction is the lesser of 3 things, and the least of these 3 things is $18,000. So our answer to the question is that his maximum deduction for the year, max deduction, is $18,000, which he can deduct from his income. All right, good job, you guys. Hope that makes sense. If not, ask me some questions or give the worksheet problem a try. Thanks.